The second part of our assignment today is a review of multiplying polynomials, which we have done before. So I'm going to actually just do a few examples here. So let's look at multiplying polynomials. Again, this one is not necessarily a polynomial, but I want to give a simplified example. So this is actually two monomials that we'll be multiplying here, and then these will be a monomial and a polynomial. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the expression. And when I multiply this out, what I notice is even though there's multiple values and multiple terms in this expression, these are simply monomials. There is not an addition or subtraction element here, so we are not going to need to distribute. We're simply going to multiply these straight across. So the first thing I have is 8 times negative 3, which is negative 24. That'll be my first one. And then my second one is going to be my x terms. So I have x cubed times x squared, which is going to give me x to the 5th. And then I have my third term, which is my y term, which is y squared times y to the cube, which is y cubed, which is y 5th. So that is actually my final answer. Now, in order for this to make more sense for some of you, you can actually write this out. Since there are no addition or subtraction operations in there, we actually could have written this as 8x cubed y squared times negative 3x squared y cubed without the parentheses. And that will get you to the same spot we are here. So the negative 24 x to the 5th y to the 5th is our answer. So let's look at number 2. Number 2, we are going to use the distributive property because we've got a monomial times a trinomial. So let's distribute. I'm going to take this factor and I'm going to multiply it by each term. So I have negative 4x squared y times x squared. Then I have negative 4 times positive 7, which is negative 28 x squared y times xy. Again, I'm just writing these all out for you right now to help. And then I've got a negative times a negative, which will be a positive 24 x squared y times y cubed. All I've done is write out my distribution. And again, I have a negative times a positive, which gives me a negative times a positive, which gives me a negative, and a negative times a negative, which gives me a positive. So now I'm going to see, can I simplify this anymore? Well, remember, when you're multiplying variables, you can add the exponents. When we add, we're not changing the exponents, but here it's a multiplication. So I'm going to have negative 4, and then I've got x squared times x squared. That's actually x to the 4th y. So let's go to the second one. I've got negative 28. I have x squared times x, which is x cubed, and y times y, which is y squared. And then my last one, I have plus 24, and I have x squared and y times y cubed, which is y to the 4th. So that is my answer for that particular example. Okay. So the last example is one that we've already done, where you're multiplying a binomial times a trinomial. And again, you're going to do a distribution. So the distribution is we're going to take each of these terms and distribute it out. So let's do the first term. I have 2x times 5x squared. That gives me 10x cubed. I'm going to skip this step now because we should be able to figure it out as we go. We have 2x times 4x, which will give me 8x squared. And then we have 2x times 7, which is 14x. So now let's look at another distribution option. I'm actually going to take the negative 5, and distribute that as well. I'll go ahead and go underneath so you can see the bottom distribution. So I have negative 5 times 5x squared, which is negative 25x squared. I have negative 5 times 4x, which is negative 20x. And I have negative 5 times 7, which is negative 35. So what I'm going to do now is go through and see if I can simplify this. So I've got 10x cubed, and that's all I can do with that one because there's no other cubes. I've got a positive 8x squared and a negative 25x squared, so that's going to give me negative 17x squared. I have a 14x and a negative 20x, which will give me a negative 6x, and then a negative 35, and we are done. So that's how you multiply the polynomials. So let's get into dividing polynomials. Dividing polynomials is a different process. You have to make sure that you still have your factoring skills. So let's look at factoring these. If I want to divide 9x minus 6 divided by 3, I have to first look at both the numerator, which is the top, and the denominator, and see within each of those individually are there GCFs, or our greatest common factors. So here I can take a 3 out of the top, and that leaves me with 3x minus 2, with a 3 still on the bottom. So when I factor these out, I end up with 3 times 3x minus 2 divided by 3. Those 3's can now cancel out, and I'm just left with, sorry, I'm going to use my purple, 3x minus 2, which is your final answer. Now let's look over at, let's look at the next one at number 3. Number 3, we've got a trinomial on top, so you can factor this. So we don't have an a term that's not a 1. The a term's 1, so we don't have to go through the whole MF darm. So I'm going to take 6, and I'm going to factor the 6. And the factors of 6 are 6 and 1 and 3 and 2. Because this is a minus sign, I'm subtracting, so I'm looking for 2 factors of 6 that give me 5. And that is 6 and 1. So I'm going to factor the top here. I've got 6 and 1, and since the b term is negative, remember that sign goes there. Since the c term is negative, that means if one's positive, one's negative. Since I only have an a term of 1, I don't have to divide by a and reduce and move. I'm done. That's my factors. And then on the bottom, I have x plus 1. So I'm going to look now and see, is there anything I can cancel or reduce? And there is. I've got an x plus 1 in both the numerator and denominator, so those will divide out. And my final answer is just going to be x minus 6. So now let's look at number 2, which I kind of went out of order. And we have an f plus 4, but on top, if you notice, we have a sum of cubes. This can be written as f cubed plus 4 cubed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the pattern for sum of cubes to factor that f cubed plus 4 cubed. If you remember, a sum of cubes looks like this. The way you factor it is base plus base times base squared minus product of bases plus second base squared. I apologize, that's kind of hard to see. So we're going to apply that here with our sum of cubes. So my two bases are f and 4. So my first factor is going to be f plus 4. My second factor is going to be my first base, which is f squared, minus my two bases multiplied, which would be f times 4, so 4f, plus my second base squared, which is 4, which is 16. So now I can go back, and on top I can rewrite this as f plus 4 times f squared minus 4f plus 16, and on the bottom, f plus 4. Looking at this now, do we have anything that we can cancel or reduce? And the answer is yes. Both of these have an f plus 4 in the numerator and the denominator, so those will divide out into 1. So you're left with f squared minus 4f plus 16. And that is your final answer, reduced. And that is how you multiply and divide polynomials using factoring.